Brexit is so exhausting, it's not a topic of conversation. Having said that, I think the motivation about it is the anger and upset about the mass migration, the freedom of travel. Even Europeans, the British could live without it. But of course there's this controversial topic of the Muslims arriving in Britain. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a grand strategy. It's been planned, it's induced, it's encouraged, it's paid for. But that isn't really the point I'd like to make. The point is you've got all this friction throughout Europe with mass migration. And it's always pitted as a Christian versus Islam, Christian-Muslim conflict. Of course, we know who's pulling the strings. But in reality, if you look at the globe, there are so many Muslim countries angry about the Muslim migrants. I can list them. Bangladesh is not happy about the Rohingyas. It's not giving them rights. It's not giving them the rights to live there, to work there, to own a cell phone. I won't go on. And it's only recently where it really had no choice but to accept masses of them, but it still wants them to leave. So it didn't welcome them. And this has been going on for decades, this issue. In Iran, you've got millions of Afghans, of course, escaping the war. And the Iranians are not happy about it. They'd like to make it an issue, but, we're all governed by an elite that tell us to what we can say and what we can't say. And we know about that nowadays in the West. But there's tremendous anger about the mass migration of Afghanis into Tehran and Iran. And you can imagine poor people uprooted will do what they have to do to survive. I'm not familiar with any stories or details. And then we move over to Turkey. Turkey's got masses of Iranians entering, as well as Arabs. And 10 or 15 years ago, it was kind of Syria, Jordan, or places like that where people would migrate to, other Arabs for safety, for if there was trouble in their own countries. But those places are no longer... Arab Emirates is the other one that was a good place to go to. But they're kind of all losing their luster. And now people have chosen Turkey. In fact, they can buy Turkish passports for $250,000. And the top three that are buying them are Iranians, Iraqis, and Yemenis. The Qataris and the United Arab Emirates are so wealthy they can make it to America or Europe or whatever. But the Arabs that migrate to Turkey have kind of sold their belongings, and they've got wealth, and they're somewhat integrated at this point, and that would include the Syrian refugees. Now, the whole idea of this safe zone, because the Turkish people have become very angry and upset about the masses of migration, in particular Syrian immigrants, or migrants, or refugees. But, Erdogan's... One of the big issues about the safe zone is keep the Kurds away, that the Americans and Israelis presumably are arming, but also to get the Syrian refugees inside Turkey to go into a safe zone, into an area not under Damascus control. But it's not likely to happen because the Syrians have become very integrated in Turkey, along with the millions of Iraqis from the Iraqi war. And so there's all these issues bubbling inside Turkey that don't really hit the headlines. But to use the parallel of what I started with, which is all the conflict in Europe about the masses of Muslim Arab migration, it's the same thing that's happening in the Islamic world. I've given you three examples: Bangladesh, Iran, and Turkey. But recently there's like huge numbers of migrants, particularly from Iran, Iraq, and the Gulf area. The Saudis are it's a plan B. If things go sour or belly up in Saudi Arabia, they move to Turkey. So I think it gives us a better perspective. There's this horrible satanic force on earth forcing people to migrate by the millions, and coercing them to do it, enticing them to do it. And of course they run the UN too. So, the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, is there to help, assist, transport the people. And it's painted to us as a humanitarian cause, which of course it is, but you're better off tackling the roots of the problem than the symptoms. The people are running away for a reason, and they don't want to. You leave people alone, they don't want to run away unless they're just born very restless with a bee in their bonnet, like me and some others. But we're not run-of-the-mill people. They've started this safe zone in the north of Syria, joint patrols between Turkey and the United States. There's total distrust between them. It's just a facade, it's a delaying tactic, there's no trust between them, and they're going to end up in a conflict. The conflict has got to move to Turkey. It's gone everywhere else. And it doesn't seem that it can go into Iran. Iran has somehow got the strength to stop it happening. But, Iran, to the north of Iran, is Azerbaijan. I think I read a third of Iranians are from Azerbaijan. So, it's got a big influence. But America's giving it loads of military aid, and it's got great relations with Israel, as far as I know. And it's another front in the war on Iran, which, we're not privy to the way they barter at the top, but they no doubt barter regions of influence, and the firing of the missiles and the actual deaths of soldiers is part of the bartering negotiations. At this time, the Israeli Prime Minister has gone to Russia. Well, what always happens after he visits Russia is there's an Israeli bombing raid on Syria. It seems like clockwork. So we'll see this time. But that could be part of the bartering. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said he's going there for a meeting to discuss improving the military coordination mechanism between Israel and Russia in Syria. It doesn't sound good. We have all this democracy that we live in. You'd think it would mean truth and reality. But really, we're talking in falsehoods and cross purposes and illusions. And we're dreaming of businesses making a profit when it's all racketeering. And we're talking about, most people probably talking about 9/11 as if it's the way the official story goes. I mean, we're not talking in truth and reality. We're escaping from it. Well, we're also getting in trouble if we don't, if we have to remain politically correct. I'll finish with one little anecdotal true story. There's a candidate in the United Arab Emirates under the guise of democracy, and she is suggesting promoting polygamy so that there's an end to spinsterhood, so that a man can have more than one wife and women do not get left alone to be single. There's far more to it than I've told you, but it's interesting, and I think it will gain traction around the world. There's something to be said for it if a man can cope and is responsible. I bid you farewell. I need your help with a donation. I've been through tough times for 2 weeks. It kind of made me think I'd get my channel back. I was told point blank I'd get it back in 24 hours, but we'll ignore all that. I need your help with donations, okay? Anything to the bank account, to the PayPal account. I always send an email reply. I always say thank you. And if you want to do a cryptocurrency, send me an email and I can accept that too. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully.